For the 2024 season, who are the 10 most important Florida State Seminoles?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To Locked On Seminoles, I am your host, Brian Smith. Today's show is going to talk about the 10 most important Noles and how I rank them for the upcoming 2024 season. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please hit that like button and that subscribe, rate, and review this show. We are happy to be here to have some fun. So today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Let's dive in. These are the 10 players that I think are the most important for Florida State's ultimate success to reach the college football playoff and, quite honestly, make an opportunity for themselves long term. This is a defining season. Last year, Florida State broke through. Not only were good, but they were really good. They won their first 13 games. That's hard. But now you're the hunted. Florida State is back towards the top of the college football world. To stay there, this season needs to be a big-time success as well. Got to prove it 2 years in a row, as they say. There's no reason to believe they won't, and here are the players that I have and why I have them ranked the way I do. People are certainly entitled to their opinions. Anybody I comment on here, you want to comment about something extra, if you think there's something that is needed or a player that wasn't brought up, fire away on YouTube, etc. I'm more than happy to talk on those points. But first off is the obvious, and that's DJ Uiagalelei. The quarterback transfer from Oregon State via Clemson is Florida State's fifth-year senior behind center. To put it mildly, the expectations for him are all over the place. From private conversations that I've had with other media members, from people that just follow football, the expectation that I've read about from numerous places, from Florida State fans, DJ's upside is there, but there's a lot of skepticism, myself included, that he's going to be consistent. If there's one word with him that I'm most worried about, it is that consistency. You got to have it if you're going to be behind center. That's not been his forte throughout his career. But here are his stats from last year that I'm going to give a little projection on what I expect this season, and then some situational scenarios that I'm most interested in, regardless of the stats. So here's what he did last year for Oregon State. 180 of 315, 57.1%, 2,638 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Modest. For those of you that did not watch Oregon State, this is an offense that is based on power football. They had an elite running back, Damian Martinez, and quite honestly, one of the most well-coached offensive lines in college football. They beat the bejesus out of the team in front of them and used play action with DJ. He was not asked to do as much as what a lot of fourth-year players might be because they didn't need him to. They were good up front, and they weren't going to turn the ball over. They tried to play smash-mouth football. Nothing wrong with that. Florida State did their fair share of that as well this past season. Is he going to play that same role with Florida State? Probably, to the most part. And that's why I think the following stats that I'm projecting are more than satisfiable, not only for Florida State, but should be for Florida State fans. I'm not picking on Oregon State here, and they had some good receivers and stuff too. Don't get me wrong. They had some good players. But I think he's going to have more talent overall, especially in the backfield from a collective standpoint. They don't have necessarily Damian Martinez, but they do have a good group. I think DJ should, at minimum, throw for 2,700 yards, if not 3,000, because you got Kyle Morlock, who people don't talk about enough, and I'll talk about him in a minute, as your tight end. He's a very athletic player that can make plays for you. You got Jack West there as well. But they got Malik Benson come in who can fly. They got Hakeem Williams, who I left off this list, just a little insight, because I think it's just safe to say he's going to be a guy. If they do all the things they should, keywords that they should in the passing game, he's going to have his moments. But Hakeem is a really talented guy, but it still starts Malik Benson, and I'll get to him in a moment too. Those two should be really good. They're going to hit big plays. Florida State's offensive line is extremely experienced. They got more depth than just about any team in college football that has at least a couple of starts under their belt. They're going to run the ball, play action, and doing all the similar things that Oregon State did last year. Florida State will be able to do consistently. So while it's not the same school, ironically, there will be many of the same principles and tendencies for DJ to fall on in Tallahassee. And he's a fifth-year guy. There's no excuse for him not to be able to pick stuff up. He would have quit football if he didn't want to go through this again. I mean, learning a new playbook is probably not much fun, but again, a lot of it's going to be similar. You got tight end, you got power football, you got a bevy of running backs. You picked up Rodell from Alabama. There's no reason to think that he's not going to have a plethora of options. And oh, by the way, Jalen Lucas, another kid I'll talk about here in a minute. They have so many gadgets and toys for him to use. He should be successful. Will it be higher than Oregon State? I fully believe it will. Now the question is, and this is the most important, how does he perform in the 4 to 6 games where Florida State plays against teams that, quite honestly, have a legitimate shot to hang into the game to at least mid-third quarter, if not make this a game all the way through and possibly beat Florida State? The top teams. Does he play well against teams that matter? We know who the games are. Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, those three stand out, but there are other games. The first contest against Georgia Tech is a good way to do it because you need to set in an example, not only for the media and all the people like me talking about it, but your teammates and your coaches. He has to play well against Georgia Tech. It is a problem if he does not. There's no denying it. I don't care if he throws 20 completions out of 25 attempts. If he has 2 picks and one's a pick 6, that's a problem. He must avoid big plays for the other team, and he obviously has to be an efficient guy, especially on third downs, to move the chains. Florida State should be a chain-moving team when they want, but still be able to hit home runs. It's the perfect scenario. They got speed, they got size, they got experience, all of those things. Just got to get them the ball. That's why quarterback's so hard. It sounds easy, but he has to make the right decisions and consistently move the football and not just rely on his right arm, which is a howitzer. He's got a powerful arm. He must be able to hit the checkdowns, not throw the ball into the wrong team's hands. If he does that, Florida State, like minimum this year, should win 9 games. Like if all the close games go against them, they should still win 9 games conservatively. And they should, in my opinion, win 10 or more, barring some horrific luck with injuries and whatnot. They should. If he does the things that we're talking about right now. That's an easy way for me to say it, but I know there's more to it. But just for an overview, I'm saying minimum 2,700 yards for DJ. He should get around 25 touchdowns, give or take. They're going to run the ball well in the red zone, so I don't think he'll hit 30 touchdowns through the air, but that's okay. He'll hit the plays that he needs to get the ball down there. That's fine. And again, don't allow the mistakes to be the key. He only had 7 picks last year with Oregon State. If he has 25 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, I think Florida State fans, and quite honestly, Mike Norvell and his entire coaching staff would be pretty happy with it. Took ours and all those guys coaching, wouldn't complain about that at all. That's a low enough number in today's college football. With the talent around him, Florida State would be in a pretty darn good spot. Next up, we're going to go through the rest of the list, talk about the other players that I think are critical for Florida State to make a run in the college football playoff. That's right here on Locked On Seminoles. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So now that DJ's out of the way, to be honest, the hardest pick for me was number 2, because I could have went about half dozen different ways. You could have said Patrick Payton, could have said numerous players, to be honest, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, but the guy that I went with is an extension of DJ, and that's Malik Benson. And this is why I didn't put Hakeem in the list. I think he's an easy pick for everybody. Just admit that I excluded him, but he's a freak of nature, and I've seen him play. I have confidence that they'll figure it out by mid-season at the latest. Hakeem's going to be in the mix making big plays. But he needs to have help to do that because I don't think he's ready yet overall as a route runner and all those things to be the guy. He's only going to be a sophomore. But Malik Benson's been through the ringer as a college player, off seasons, getting better. He's been in Alabama. This is his shot. He needs to make it happen now. It is paramount that he does, and he's a deep threat. I mentioned a moment ago, Uiagalelei has a huge arm, and that is really not in question. Big-time arm. Throwing deep is what he does well, and he has the ability to also hit those seam routes to a guy like Jack West or somebody like Jalen Lucas streaking out of the backfield, whatever it is, to make throws down the field. Benson's going to get the most coverage based on what we've seen through spring ball and what we've heard. Double teams, safety, shading to his side, things of that nature. Maybe the best DB for an opposing team. He still has to come through. I don't know what his exact numbers are, what I'm about to say, because I think Florida State's going to spray it around quite a bit. This is what I would think is ideal. I'm not saying I predict the following numbers. This would be ideal because that means he's taken the ultimate step and like he's become a dude. And remember, like Florida State had 2 guys last year that were number ones. That's really rare. But this is what would be great. 50 catches, 800 yards, 7 scores, something in that range. If he goes above that, obviously, it's great. But if he can get into that range with all the different players that Florida State has, all the experience at the wide receiver spot, they'd be in a money situation. They're going to spray it around. Guys like Jalen Lucas, who, again, I'll talk about in a minute, coming out in the slot, etc. Teams will have a very difficult time picking their poison on we're going to focus on this guy on this play or this side of the field, tendencies, whatever. Florida State has too many athletes to do that. So I'm curious to see if Benson gets a lot of coverage rolled to his side, doubles, etc., and what Norvell and his staff talk about in press conferences afterwards of what they saw and breaking down the film. Because honestly, I just don't think teams at the college level, secondaries at the college level to pro, it's just night and day. There are very few teams that have good secondaries that can play at a high level against this much talent. He should have a huge year. Number 3, let's talk about protecting DJ. Whoever the left tackle ends up being each week is the most important. He is not Jordan Travis back there. He's not going to make the first guy miss as easily as Jordan did. And I'm being kind. Good athlete, but he's not got the foot speed and the lateral mobility to get away from the passers. You can't have whiffs, etc. According to PFF last year, Pro Football Focus, Darius Washington had 0 sacks allowed. That's pretty good. 5 pressures, I think 3 hits. Even if those numbers are close to correct, and it's interpretive per person, those are great numbers. If he stays healthy, and again, Florida State's got depth, it opens up the opportunities for the Noles not only to throw the ball down the field, but when they do that, makes defenses back off, and that opens up your running game. The run sets up the pass sets up the run. It's not one way or the other. It is both. I think he's going to be an NFL player. But again, he's got to take another step forward and just be consistent this year. If you do it 2 years in a row, somebody's going to give you an NFL contract of some kind. Never have enough guys can play left tackle. So that guy for me is really important. And specifically, just one extra note on Darius, 3rd downs. It goes back to the point I made about Jordan. How many times did Jordan Travis escape the pressure? Maybe not run, but make a guy miss, just a few feet over to the right or the left. He slides, and then he completes the ball. DJ can do that to a certain degree, but he's not going to take it for 30, 50, 70 yards and score. Jordan could do that. There must be even better pass protection this season than there was last. It starts at left tackle. Let's move to defense. Darrell Jackson. This is just a personal thing for me. Out of everybody on this list, it's the most just curious because he didn't play last year, really. Like, he got hosed. He transferred from Miami back home to the area that he's from in Tallahassee. I'm not going to get into the whole NCAA thing, but 6'6", 330, give or take. Defensive tackles don't grow on trees. It means something to him. He needs the finance to help his family out. He wants to get to the NFL. I think he's going to ball out this year. I don't know numbers. I don't care about it. But I do think that Darrell will draw double teams and be a pain for opposing offenses to prepare for. That by itself will get you the NFL to come look. Can't teach his measurable, 6'6", 330. He's very athletic. I think he can have 4 or 5 sacks, not necessarily just taking guys and throwing them into the lap of the quarterback per se, that a lot of ridiculous prognostications are often thrown around about D tackles, but he can push a guy back to a certain degree. It's the lateral quickness that I've seen from Darrell just watching him prior. That's a good athlete, man. If he has a good year in the middle with Patrick Payton and just a bevy of guys at linebacker and end that are athletic, man, you're not going to have anywhere to go as a quarterback. Florida State's overall front seven as a pass defense might be the best in the country this year. It starts in the middle, though. If you can't step up into the pocket, man, it's lights out. Your amount of time to throw and read the defense is just not enough. Passing percentages will be way down. It starts with Big Darrell. Speaking of edge, Patrick Payton. Here's the key for him this year. He had Jared Verse on the opposite side for most of the snaps he was in the game in 2023. Jared's going to get more attention. I get it. Now you're the hunted, kind of like Florida State as a team. You're going to get chipped more. You're going to get double more. You're going to have teams run away for all the things that are awful for a defensive end that you have zero control over, and you still have to overcome it or come in Patrick's way. Florida State's going to scheme to that to a certain degree, and they obviously have many other players. But I think Patrick has to take that step forward, even when the scheme and the talent against him is overwhelming, whether numbers or whatever. He has to handle it, be a leader, and allow his teammates to go eat, meaning I'm doubled. I'm not going to make this play, but somebody's free. Maybe it's Lundy. Maybe it's another one. Maybe it's Darrell Jackson. Whatever. They need him to accept it, that he's going to get doubled and whatnot. And when that happens, that's okay. When he's not, he still has to go get the big-time plays. He could be a 10-sack guy this year and have 3 or 4 games. It looks like, air quotes for those of you listening to this, that he's not doing much. It's because he's getting doubled and chipped. A pure speed rusher that gets chipped has very little chance to get to the quarterback unless it's a coverage sack. But that's okay. The games that he doesn't, he could have a 3 or 4 sack game. If somebody's dumb enough to go one-on-one with him over and over and over again and just do drop back passing, then he should eat him up. We'll see what Payton does, but he's a really important player and a very gifted one. DJ Lundy, this is a little different than the other spots. Florida State lost their bevy of snaps taken last year at the linebacker spot. They're both, DeWoch is gone, etc. They lost their 2 main guys. The amount of experience that Florida State has at linebacker from last year's defense basically is him. I hate saying this, but under no circumstance can he get hurt, which is obviously not realistic to say. He cannot get hurt. He's your leader. He's arguably the best tackler in college football. If you go by Pro Football Focus in one-on-ones, ranked really, really high. He's also a guy that just knows the defense. So that leads to the point that is most important beyond injury, leadership. Between now and the end of August, they're going to be preparing for Georgia Tech, who is going to run a gazillion different things that Florida State can't prepare for because they haven't played a game yet that they haven't seen. In the middle of that game, he's got to be able to tell his guys what's coming based on something that they haven't seen on film. That sounds crazy, but he's an experienced player. Hey, they shift here. You need to go here, do this, do that, to some of the other players. In-game adjustments, and that Georgia Tech game will be huge. If it goes well, and Florida State can kind of take away some of the advantages Georgia Tech thinks it's going to get with shifts and motions, and they have a big play like a pick 6 or something, not only is that good for the scoreboard, it's good for the leadership and the players believing in what he's doing. Pivotal for Florida State's defense. They got to be in the right spots. The smallest adjustment can mean the biggest result. You're going to have a bunch of young guys like Justin Cryer, Omar Graham, etc., having to step up and play more reps. Nicholson, etc. There's a bunch of guys. Who's going to step up? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. But all of them need to have his leadership to make it happen. Next, and this is the fun one, it's Jalen Lucas. I'm just going to this is the one that's just curiosity from an entertainment standpoint. He's the running back that transferred from Indiana. Not the biggest dude. Former Louisiana player that is just track fast, really difficult to catch in space, and quite honestly, no fun if you're in a one-on-one. It's like 5'9", 5'10", 170 pounds. But if you're more than an arm's length from him and he has you head up, it's really hard to get a tackle on him. Kickoff returns, punt returns, slot fade. Maybe it's a tunnel screen. Run him in motion on jet. Whatever you want to do to get him the ball, the first guy is going to struggle more often than not to tackle him. He may only have 40 touches this year. Maybe he only has 60, something like that. They can use him in a million different ways, but it's the other 40 or 60 where they fake it to him, where the team thinks that he's going to get it, that Florida State's going against, that he's just as valuable. He may only get 2 or 3 carries a game. Florida State's loaded at running back. It's ridiculous, but he might have 30 catches. It's just impossible to project his stats. I don't know. I do hope that he ends up with like 60, 70 touch. And I'm talking about special teams, and they let him return punts. Sometimes coaches don't want guys that can be big time players to do it, but I think he would be really, really fun to see that. And to be honest, there aren't many guys as shifty as Jalen Lucas in college football. So we're going to finish up the list here in just a second on Locked On Seminoles right here on this channel. Jalen Lucas, the shaky, shifty guy, right? We have all these different players that have incredible ability on Florida State's roster to make guys miss. The next player, it's ironic that I mentioned that because he's not the small guy that does that. I just think he's underrated as a pure athlete because he's longer and he's a defensive player. That's Ezra Thomas, the corner. I was looking up his stats and I was shocked. I'm surprised I didn't remember this. For as good as he was, especially towards the end of last season, he didn't have a pick. For some reason, I thought he had a couple, but whatever. He didn't have any. So that's number one. He needs to step up and just have a better season that way. Doesn't mean that he can't be impactful other ways, because looking at his numbers last year, he had 10 pass breakups, 4.5 tackles for loss. I mean, the guy's a good football player. But this year for Florida State to take that next step, and especially not just to make the playoff, but to do something when you get there, when an opportunity comes your way to get a pick six, and this is for those of you listening to this show, I love the guy that actually catches the ball on defense. You know, the old saying, DBs play DB because they can't catch. That's garbage to me. If you're playing the secondary receiver runner, you have to be able to catch. When the ball comes his way, not only catch it, now do something with it. Big time plays are pick sixes. Big time plays where you shift the field, where you get the ball and you take it the other direction, if it's plausible. Now, there could be one where he's falling out of bounds or something to catch it. That's different. But when he has the opportunity, as athletic as Thomas is, he could have been a receiver. Really good athlete, length, make a play and make it happen. I think he's one of the best DBs in college football, and he could be a guy that turns pro after this next season, his junior year. Not many 6'2" kids move like him. Really think that, especially when you got Ventrell Cypress on the other side, here's the final point on him. They can't avoid him by just throwing at Ventrell. Well, he's just as good, probably. Different style, not quite as big, but they're similar players. You got to pick your poison in Florida State's nickel and their safeties. They're all good. They're all good. Now you just have to figure out which one you're going to throw at. So Thomas is going to get his opportunities. Number 9, Kyle Morlock. I've mentioned this a few times this year. You could make an argument that Florida State's best opportunity to keep teams off balance offensively is Morlock. Hakeem Williams, Benson, those guys, that's pretty self-explanatory. They're going to use Jalen Lucas. They're going to throw it to Rodell Williams and screens. They're going to mix it up. But not enough people talk about tight ends with Florida State. Last year they did. I mean, Jaheim caught the ball and did really well. Had some really key moments for the Noles. Why wouldn't Morlock be next? They're going to give him chances. He's most likely to start, and he is a talented young man. I think minimum, he should catch 30 balls. Now, again, I know they're going to spray it around, and maybe they're going to spray around the opportunity. Jack West and other guys, you know, Landon Thomas has come in, really talented freshman. I understand that. But I'd imagine DJ, knowing the experienced player that Morlock is, he's going to know the offense. He'll have some continuity with it. Just a guess. I don't have any insight on that, but I think 30 catches is kind of a minimum. Just as important, he needs to be a consistent blocker on outside zone, when he pulls, when he's an H-back and he leads the running back through the hole. Those are hard things to do, and they're not often discussed. He's a very critical player in that regard. And so is anybody else playing the H-back or tight end role. Got to block just as well as you catch the football. I think he's a good player, and I think he's underrated. So we'll see what Kyle Morlock does. Number 10, and the final guy, this is just kind of my opinion. I mentioned a little bit ago that DJ Lundy had to be the leader of the linebacker group, really specific about making sure guys are lined up. There's going to be things they don't know that's coming against Georgia Tech. It's guaranteed. Every year, first games, teams will throw something at a talented team like Florida State to catch them off guard. It's just, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, now, even if he does it, do the players react to it well? Justin Cryer, Nicholson, Omar Graham, etc. I don't really care which one, and I'm cheating here. I'm not picking a player. It's just all the other linebackers, not named Lundy. Do they adjust immediately this season? Game 1. I'm telling you, Georgia Tech is going to throw the kitchen sink schematically, formationally, and shifts at Florida State. It is flat out coming. If you see a play where the announcer, in the middle of the play, the announcer says, boy, there was a big hole there. Where was the line? It's going to be a mental error. Georgia Tech is not going to out-physical Florida State. It's not going to happen. They don't have as much talent. But they have a good coaching staff, a veteran QB that can really run. He's a super athlete. He's in the Jordan Travis realm. And he's also a kid that has a pretty darn big arm, and they got some speed at receiver. So they're going to do shifts and all kinds of things. I'm curious to see if they do some two tight end, H-back, and just constantly shifting around, kind of like you see at the beginning of an NFL game where they're trying to gain leverage and somebody doesn't move at the right time, and they're a little bit behind. That out route is easy 5-7 yards. All those little things that are with steps, timing, and recognition. I'm concerned about the linebackers being in that spot because it's hard. But they have to take the discipline from the coaching staff and from guys like Lundy and be on their game. If they do that, Florida State will win this game going away. If they don't, the game could be very close, and you never know what happens in the fourth quarter. So with that, please like this video and subscribe, rate, and review. I truly appreciate you stopping in and check out Locked On Seminoles today and every day. This has been Brian Smith of Locked On Seminoles. I'll see you again tomorrow.